Tonight, Swine Flu 101. Colleges activate emergency plans after H1N1 outbreak sickened thousands.
Monday I woke up with a really bad fever and could barely breathe because my chest hurt so bad.
And a new CBS News poll shows concern is up dramatically. I'm Jeff Glor. Also tonight, a case of arson. Investigators say they found the material that triggered the largest and most dangerous fire near Los Angeles. A father's quest. Approaching the anniversary of 9/11, nearly every family has settled out of court. But he says no, and now he has a trial date. And controlled chaos. The town in Holland that believes that no traffic lights or stop signs means safer streets for cars and pedestrians.
This is the CBS Evening News with Jeff Glor.
And good evening. The latest CBS News poll out tonight reveals growing concern over the H1N1 swine flu epidemic. 72% of Americans now believe the flu is a serious problem, up from just 49% in May. The World Health Organization reports the worldwide death toll from H1N1 is 2,837. And with the summer ending, the main flu season approaching, and students now back at school, concern may be highest on campus. Here's Mark Strassman.
At Washington State's main campus, back to school means back to bed. The H1N1 virus has hit 2,000 students.
Monday I woke up with a really bad fever and could barely breathe because my chest hurt so bad.
Just on freshman Ashley Dunn's floor, 6 women have the virus. The school's urging sick kids to stay in their rooms, but
you have to keep going to classes because you feel like you're going to miss a lot, and so then that's how you keep getting sick.
America's collegiate sick-out has schools scrambling to keep up. Schools like the University of Kansas and Florida State have food drops for sick students. In Cincinnati, Xavier banned large gatherings through Labor Day. Stillman College in Alabama canceled today's season-opening football game. And California's Pomona College has a new mandatory course for freshmen, the proper way to sneeze and cough.
The best place to cough is into fabric, such as one's sleeve.
I share a bathroom with 7 other guys. That's a little bit of a concern with me.
Hardest hit by the virus, campuses in the Northwest and Southeast, like Emory University in Atlanta. Students here call this dorm Club Swine.
It's not that bad of a place. Everyone's just kind of sick.
It's a dorm only for flu victims. Students voluntarily check themselves in, and half the school's 220 H1N1 cases have come here to rest, recover, and help slow the spread of the virus.
We knew we were going into a flu season without our students, faculty, and staff being vaccinated.
Emory had plans to knock down this old dorm back in the spring, but kept it just in case the H1N1 virus hit hard on campus later in the year. And planning paid off. In Washington, D.C., American University reached into its post-9/11 emergency plan. Professors have to learn to lecture over the internet in case the virus empties their classrooms.
We could become temporarily an online university.
Against this threat, campuses are on their own. They hope the H1N1 vaccine will help when it arrives late next month. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Atlanta.
There is concern about the H1N1 threat at the elementary school level 2, and some parents are more worried about the vaccine than the flu itself. Michelle Miller has that story.
What do you know about the swine flu? These Washington, D.C. 5th graders have been studying up on the H1N1 virus.
They said they were going to start vaccinating people maybe in October.
And even though the last thing they want is another shot.
Well, I don't cry, it just hurts a lot.
They're pretty grown up about the idea of a vaccine.
I think it would be better if people take the vaccine because then they won't get the flu.
Children are especially vulnerable to the swine flu, and the CDC recommends that school-aged kids be among the first to be vaccinated.
And parents seem to be getting the message. In a new CBS News poll, 45% say it's very likely they'll sign their kids up for the shot. Another 22% say it's somewhat likely.
We've talked to our pediatrician, and he thinks it's a good idea.
But D.C. pediatrician Joanna Sexter has doubts about its safety.
We don't yet know a whole lot about the swine flu vaccine.
Concern over the haste of this inoculation program stems from one back in 1976. 12 Americans died and hundreds more were paralyzed after getting the swine flu vaccine.
I'm probably not going to be the first doctor on the block to give the vaccine.
Clinical trials on the new vaccine have begun on children between the ages of 6 months to 17 years. And while early results of adult testing found no serious side effects, final results aren't due out until late October, potentially after the government launches the first 45 million doses nationwide.
You hear stories a little bit about how they're rushing to make huge quantities of vaccine.
So some parents say they're not taking any chances.
And I'm just not quite there yet until we get more research on what the effects could be for children so young.
But Erin Lubier and her kids have reason to be among the first in line.
But it lasted a week and it was pretty severe.
She and her 8-year-old daughter contracted swine flu this summer. Now she says she'll take all recommended precautions, including a vaccine. Michelle Miller, CBS News, Washington.
California officials said today they have clear evidence of arson in the deadly station fire north of Los Angeles. Tonight, that fire is 49% contained. 2 firefighters died in what investigators now say was a criminal homicide. And the state is offering a $100,000 reward for information. Kelly Kobiea has the latest from the front lines.
For 11 days, the station fire laid waste to the Angeles National Forest, destroying at least 64 homes and killing firefighters Arnaldo Quinones and Captain Tedmond Hall when their truck plunged off a mountain road. This week, colleagues paid respects as their bodies were driven past.
The LA County Sheriff's Department homicide now is looking at the tragic deaths of those 2 firefighters as a criminal homicide.
Investigators have concluded the fire was ignited by arson after reportedly finding incendiary material near its initial flashpoint. The news sparked outrage at the firefighting command post.
I believe any act of arson in the wildlands is domestic terrorism.
Oh, there's a lamp right there.
Duncan Baird's home of 26 years is in ashes. He wants the arsonist to face justice.
He just needs to go to jail for the rest of his life, that's all.
Do you think that'll happen?
Well, I don't know. They got to catch him first, don't they?
Arson cases are notoriously difficult to investigate and prosecute. Only about 10% actually end up in court, and the evidence is often circumstantial. One of the first steps investigators will take is to question the firefighters who were first on the scene.
What did they see? Where did they see it? Did they see anybody leaving the scene? Who reported the fire first?
While linking evidence to a suspect is difficult, it's not an impossible task. In June, 38-year-old Raymond Lee Euler was sentenced to death for starting a 2006 fire east of Los Angeles that killed 5 firefighters. Investigators found his DNA on the cigarette he used to spark the blaze. Arson accounts for only 7% of wildfires in California, but as the station fire demonstrates, even one fire can have enormously destructive and tragic consequences. Kelly Kobiea, CBS News, Tahunga, California.
Overseas tonight, the top NATO commander in Afghanistan acknowledged today that civilians were harmed during an airstrike yesterday. And General Stanley McChrystal promised a full investigation. But the incident in the northern province of Kunduz is another blow to NATO unity, as we hear now from Elizabeth Palmer.
There's no longer any doubt that Afghan civilians were injured in Friday's airstrike.
Anytime anybody is hurt, it is something that gives pause to everybody, particularly when they're young people, still children.
The airstrike on 2 fuel tankers hijacked by the Taliban was called in by German troops. And the incident is bound to further erode German public support for the war. 42 NATO countries have sent troops to Afghanistan, and virtually across the board, polls show voter support for the mission is falling. 52% of Canadians don't want their military's mission extended. In France, 64% of people disapprove of keeping French troops in. And 59% of those polled in Britain say UK troops should withdraw.
Of the Afghan government.
Back in April, President Obama pressed NATO members for more help in Afghanistan.
Europe should not simply expect the United States to shoulder that burden alone.
It was a tough sell then, and it got tougher as both American and NATO soldiers realized how little they could rely on Afghanistan's own security forces for support.
Major problems with quality of leadership, with corruption, with links to narco-traffickers, with defections.
Add to that this week mounting evidence of fraud in Afghanistan's August presidential elections.
I'm concerned.
The opposition candidate, Abdullah Abdullah, says that ballot box stuffing and voter intimidation occurred on a massive scale.
It's not violations here and there. It's not rigging one or two cases. It's a state-engineered fraud.
As the citizens of NATO countries watch their young soldiers come home in coffins, more and more are deciding that the cost of continuing to fight in Afghanistan is just too high. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, London.
Coming up on tonight's CBS Evening News, an American town without a drop of water to spare. The wildfires that have torched bone-dry California this summer have been fueled by years of drought. In the fertile Central Valley, the drought has set off a tug-of-war over the most precious commodity of all, water. Seth Doan has more.
There's not been a drop of water put on this field this year. Even the weeds died.
Without enough water, Central California rancher Joe Del Bosque left half of his farmland unplanted.
What does an empty field mean for you?
It means there's no income generated.
California is in its third year of drought, and its effects are visible far beyond these fields.
What you see behind me is the high water mark here at the San Luis Reservoir. The last time it reached that level
was 3.5 years ago, before this drought began. Today, the reservoir is at just 19% capacity. It's part of a system that moves water from the relatively wet north to the arid south. As the region's population has grown, so has its thirst. But another species competes for this water too. Regulations to protect the endangered smelt further limit how much water can be pumped into these canals. This year, Joe received just 10% of the water he needs.
Something has to be done or we won't last another year.
To try to survive, he's focused on higher yield crops like cantaloupe and cut back his payroll 50%. That means employees like Leticia Godinez are working less. Earning $8.25 an hour, she was already struggling to pay her college loans.
Do you think about water here a lot?
Here, yes, because that's what's needed to grow all these plants. And without them growing, we can't work.
To try to give you a sense for just how much farmland is sitting idle because farmers don't have enough water, this was Joe's tomato patch. It's about 150 acres. But in this county alone, more than 250,000 acres sits idle. That's enough to fill around 200,000 football fields.
And jobs here have dried up along with the water supply. In Mendota, California, the unemployment rate is alarming, nearly 40%. So twice a month, those who would have been in the fields harvesting now wait in a food line for handouts.
The last time I worked was in February.
Wow. Have you been looking for work since?
I've been looking for work every day.
On this day, politicians used hundreds of words to describe the plight of this agricultural community.
These are some of the hardest working people you'll ever meet in your life.
While those waiting in line for food chose just one. Agua, water. As global demand for it increases, a bigger battle may be looming, with these communities on the front line, already watching every drop. Seth Doan, CBS News in Central California.
Next up on tonight's CBS Evening News, the first 9/11 family to get its day in court. Next week marks the 8th anniversary of 9/11. Since that horrible day, almost every victim's family has settled its wrongful death complaints, except just a few, and only one has a trial date scheduled. That is the focus of tonight's Weekend Journal. A father who says he will not stop until the case is finished in court.
This was actually over here right at the corner on West Street.
Every September, Arkansas businessman Mike Lowe returns to the place where his daughter was murdered.
I want people to know that 9/11 could have been prevented. These Saudi thugs could have been stopped.
Sarah Lowe was a 28-year-old flight attendant on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane al-Qaeda terrorists crashed into the World Trade Center. When Mike first called the airline that morning, he was told Sarah wasn't on the flight. But later he and his wife Bobby and their older daughter Allison learned the awful truth.
The intensity of our loss has not changed.
Almost all of the 9/11 families, 98% of them, renounced any claims against the airlines and airport security companies in return for payments from a $7 billion government fund. 96 families pursued lawsuits, and all but 3 have settled. Mike Lowe is the first one to get a trial date set for next April in Manhattan Federal Court because he says more could have been done.
The people with the responsibility at the security checkpoints had the opportunities. The people that hired them, trained them, supervised them.
Lowe's lawsuit has resulted in 1 million pages of documents. His goal is transparency, for every one of them to be in the public archive. He calls what he's learned about Sarah's actions in particular that day a gift.
She helped identify the seat numbers of the hijackers. In the last 30 minutes of Sarah's life, she was moving passengers to the back, helping keep them calm.
Sarah felt at home in the sky, flying from an early age with her dad, a private pilot.
Sarah started flying with me from diapers. I would take her with me on flights, and she would just fall asleep at the hum of the engine.
To this day, Lowe wears a ring he once gave Sarah, which was recovered at Ground Zero, along with some of her remains. He says his lawsuit is not about money. It's about accountability.
I don't think closure is something that we can attain. Only if you wanted to describe it in doing all I can do for Sarah as a parent.
You still feel an obligation to her?
That's what drives me, yes.
Today, the Lowe family hosted its 3rd annual Sarah Lowe Memorial 5K race in their hometown of Batesville, Arkansas, to raise money for a scholarship fund in Sarah's name. We'll be right back. Can you imagine having no traffic lights or signs or any other way of keeping cars and people apart? The results would be dangerous chaos, right? Well, Mark Phillips tells us what happened when one town in Holland tried.
They've got a lot of faith in human nature in the small Dutch town of Drachten. Its main intersection is a busy place where cars and trucks compete with people on bicycles and others on foot. The normal civic response here and elsewhere has been to put in more traffic lights, divide the roadway into lanes, control things. But the response in Drachten has been the opposite. They took the controls away, and a funny thing happened. The accident rate around this intersection went down, way down, from more than 8 a year to fewer than 2.
We wanted to appeal to social behavior, people's own behavior and responsibility.
Here's a test, so she waits. The city council here decided to implement a new philosophy in urban planning called shared space. Left to their own devices, the thinking goes, people use their own devices.
A little bit of chaos helps people to think for themselves, be alert and react on the situation.
Not far away in the village of Mackinge, the sign you see as you approach town is the last sign you'll see. All traffic signals and notices have been removed. Everyone from school kids to truck drivers is on their own.
You see the children looking, where can I cross? What's a good place to cross?
The whole point of the shared space idea is that it changes behavior. Drivers no longer look for road signs or traffic lights. They look for people on foot or on bicycles. People on bikes have to watch out for themselves and for those in cars and on foot. And those walking have to watch out for everybody. The idea is that this takes responsibility away from the traffic engineers and puts it on the individual.
The idea is catching on in bigger places. There are now shared space schemes in several countries in Western Europe and some being considered in America.
As soon as you remove the certainty provided by signals and lines and regulation, then the attitude of drivers changes completely. This is one of the paradoxes. It is a tough sell. It's very difficult, and it's not surprising that people feel uncomfortable with this idea. It takes a while.
But where it's been tried, the people and the dropping accident statistics say it works. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Drachten, Holland.
That is the CBS Evening News tonight. Later on CBS, 2 editions of 48 Hours Mystery. Russ Mitchell will be here tomorrow night. I'm Jeff Glor, CBS News in New York. Good night.